I think that it's this foreign idea that you can have vendor relationships that don't exist online. They don't come from a screen. And I think that the biggest benefit of really focusing on vendor relationships is how can this support both of us? Not going into it with the agenda of this needs to benefit me, 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 me. Remember, on the wedding day, we're a team.
Hey there, and welcome to the Event Crushed podcast. Each week, we'll be chatting about all things wedding industry, entrepreneurship, and how to crush it in life and business. I'm so glad you're here. Now, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the Event Crushed podcast. This is your host, Becky, and I have an amazing guest with me here today who I know that you are going to love. Becca Tuttle is the owner of Becca Co, a Sacramento-based wedding planning company, as well as a business coach for wedding planners through her signature program, Wedding Planner Roadmap. She's been in the wedding industry for over a decade, and today we're diving into one of my very favorite topics, the power of authentic vendor relationships, practical networking strategies, and you'll also hear some incredible real life stories from Becca about how relationships with fellow wedding pros quite literally saved the day. If you are feeling burnt out on social media, like I know many of us are, and looking for other ways to generate leads and build a sustainable wedding business, you are going to love this conversation. Let's dive right in. Well, hey, Becca, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on and chatting with me today.
I am super, super pumped to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think our topic is something we both feel really strongly about. And so I just think it's going to be a great conversation. And I know that a lot of people right now are kind of burnt out on social media. So I think the idea of talking about a way to bring in business and revenue and leads and bookings that doesn't have to do with social media, I think people are going to love that.
Yeah, I guarantee you there are some people listening right now being like, how? Because we've just gotten so used to going down the social media path. And it's a great path, but there are other options.
For sure. Yes, there's other options, and we don't need to put all of our eggs in one basket. So today we're going to be talking about how we can leverage our vendor and venue relationships to help us grow our businesses. But before we get into all of that, I would love it if you could just introduce yourself to the listeners and let them know who you are, what you do, and just a little bit about your background in the wedding industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been around the block a time or two. I am that silly little girl who is like 8 years old and wedding obsessed, which is so random. Not necessarily playing bride, but I was the flower girl in my aunt's wedding. And she had a wedding planner because she had like a 3-day full Catholic mass whole wedding shindig. So she had to have a wedding planner. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a job? Like, you can do that? And both of my parents are entrepreneurs of sorts. And so I very much was acquainted with the idea of working for yourself and sort of creating something for yourself. So at like age 8, I was like, yeah, I'm going to own my own business and be a wedding planner. Like, that's just going to be what happens. Everyone get on board. And so that's like the very, very start of the journey. And then when I went to college, I went to SDSU, shout out Aztecs. And I did quite a number of jobs, but there's 2 or 3 that really stand out. Most notably, I got hired through Hyatt. So I actually started in my career of events through Hyatt and through a private internship for a wedding planner down in San Diego. And so it was really interesting because I got to sort of do both things at the same time and really try to figure out, okay, do I want to go the private route and launch and work for myself? Or do I want to stay in this more of a safe nook, working for a larger corporation and doing events that way? And I learned very quickly that I wanted to have a lot of freedom in the choice, not just for my couples, but for myself as to what types of weddings we would and wouldn't do, and all of the creative ins and outs and various things that you can do with a wedding that you can't always do inside the four walls of a hotel. And so that just was very clearly defined as my path was I wanted to be able to be in more than one location and do all of these kinds of things. So that was like the very, very first step of it. Fast forward a bunch of years, 2015, I launched what was then Events by Rebecca and now Becca Co, which is a wedding planning company based out of Sacramento, California. And then about 2019, just before the pandemic, I started dabbling in business coaching and coaching some other wedding planners who I was always getting the question. I'm sure you've got this question a million times over before you started doing something like this. How did you launch? How did you get your first clients? How did you grow a team? How did you? And so that's sort of what sparked that interest. But then when the pandemic happened in 2020 and there were no events, but there were a lot of questions about what to do with your business, I just full-fledged went all in on the coaching side and really kind of developed that side of the business in tandem with the wedding planning side. Both still exist, but fast forward and now we're almost at 10 years in April. So
wow,
pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know we're going to get into a little bit later. We'll talk a little bit more about your coaching and kind of what you offer for planners. But I love just hearing your story. I think, I don't know. I love that you were 8. I have an 8-year-old daughter right now, and she would never want anything to do with weddings. But I love that you were like, you knew at that age, like that's so fun. I didn't know till much later in life, but I had a similar situation. I mean, I had just gotten married myself and I didn't have a wedding planner. Like at that time, I really didn't know that people got paid to plan weddings.
Yeah.
So that was, a little later in life, but that like epiphany moment when you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. And I didn't know that your original company name was, did you say Events by Rebecca?
Yeah.
I love that. So my name is also Rebecca.
I know.
And when I was in college, I was taking a marketing class and we had to come up with a business. This was shortly after I was married. So in my head, I was thinking about wedding planning, and I'm pretty sure like the name that I put on my business cards was Events by Rebecca or Rebecca Heart Events or something like that. So anyways, that just brought me back.
We're soul sisters. That's so fun. I know. I think the only time in my life, other than when I launched my business, that I went by the name Rebecca was like when I was born and didn't have a voice to say, no, I'm Becca. And then my whole life, it was like, no, don't call me Rebecca. I'm Becca. So it was I think when I launched, I call her baby Becca when I launched that version of me. Thought it sounded like way more professional and like elegant and like sophisticated. And so I was like, I'm Events by Rebecca. Cause Becca, Becky, we're like the nickname version. Right.
Yeah. I literally had that exact same thought. Yeah. I literally never go by Rebecca. Like the only time it was Rebecca, it was like if I got in trouble and then it was my full name. But when I was thinking about that, I was like, oh, yeah, Rebecca, like it's so sophisticated. Like so I had the exact same thought, which is hilarious. And then I was like, yeah.
And then, so like in 2020, when the rebrand was official, I was like, this needs to go. We're Becca Co. Like this is so much more me. And everyone that knows me was like, we've been waiting for this. I know, guys. I know. I had a crisis. It's fine.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love your current name is super fun and seems very
appreciate that. It does, because we have more than I actually very rarely plan the weddings. I do 1 or 2 a year now.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing. I love it. Okay, well, I mean, we could talk about teams. We could talk about so many things.
I'll probably have to have you
back on another time.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do a series.
Right?
The Becca and Becky series.
I love it. Okay, so for the topic at hand today, we're talking about, like I said, kind of leveraging those vendor and venue relationships. So how can we make the best use of those relationships? And what should we be doing to leverage those relationships?
Yeah, well, I mean, even just to take it a step back even further, I think one of the things that's so overlooked, we were talking about how, social media is the golden egg. It's the beast that we think of when it comes to lead gen. And yes, all of that is true. However, I think because social media is so approachable and so ingrained in business owners now, especially in the wedding world, we often forget that there's this whole other pool of opportunity And maybe there's even a whole generation who isn't even used to the idea of networking in person. Because especially again, coming out of the pandemic, like everything like that got canceled for a very long time. And so I think that it's this foreign idea that you can have vendor relationships that don't exist online. They don't come from a screen or from both. And I think that the biggest benefit of really focusing on vendor relationships is how can this support both of us? Not going into it just like how with the agenda of this needs to benefit me, 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 me. Remember, on the wedding day, we're a team. So it needs to start that way. At least this is something I wholeheartedly believe, and this is etched into all of the values of my company. Mm-hmm. We are a team from start to finish to after. And we need to have each other's backs. And a lot of that can actually start in that networking phase. And those networking relationships become real relationships. Mm-hmm. We call them frienders. Friend vendors. And then those just beautifully become very natural, very easy referrals for couples because you want to work together. So you're like, oh, you want my girl. Like you got to get them on your team. Right. And then there's even further where you can take this where it's making the couple's life easier because they know they're being referred quality people. But it's going to make your life so much easier on the day of because you can trust that other vendor. So I know I'm kind of covering a lot here, but I think some of these key pieces of what I'm sort of kind of building around this idea of vendor relationships aren't impossible to foster over social media, but they are more difficult. So I think tying that in with lead gen, because lead gen comes from various sources. Let's talk about Instagram, right? Like lead gen on Instagram can come from another vendor and it can come from the couple directly. Same thing can happen in person. So that's sort of where I'm going with this and jumping around a lot. But to bring it all together, you can't only rely on social media for those positive experiences, those first touches from couples. It can work and it works really well. But it's also really beneficial to rely on natural, real relationships that exist offline with other vendors to be that first touch with those ideal couples. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. No, I like how you explain it that way. I think it's just good to step back, like you said, and just have a full understanding and just kind of look at things from a different perspective.
Yeah. And I think that it's so overlooked because, I know there's days I don't want to get on my sweatpants and go to a fancy networking event and meet other people. But that's where all of my outside of a wedding, that's where all of my frienders have come from, where those vendor relationships have come from. And those are one of the most natural, organic lead sources for your business.
Absolutely. There's nothing better. I love being like the matchmaker, like playing matchmaker with my couples and vendors and just like knowing their vibe and what they're looking for in their budget. And then having, as we're talking, I'm like, oh, I have the perfect person for you. And just then when it all lines up and it's just the best. Cause like you said, then on the wedding day, like you can trust that person, that they're going to be reliable. They're going to take amazing care of your couple. It's a win for everybody.
Well, especially as planners, right? Like we're not going to refer somebody who may completely make our lives awful. Right. And then I think the flip happens too. Like a lot of photographers who want to refer planners or a lot of venues that want to refer planners, they're not going to be referring people that put more work on their plate. That should be the planner's job. Right. I think it's all kind of mutually. People are referring because they like each other, but they're also referring because of the quality of service that vendor will deliver. Mm-hmm. And you can't get to understand what that might be for somebody without building a relationship and having conversation and meeting up and doing things together like styled shoots or whatever it may be, right? Like you have to create those opportunities for those vendor relationships to become authentic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I love what you said about it being mutually beneficial and supporting each other. And it's not, I think the people that really struggle in the wedding industry are people who are just coming at everything from like what can you do for me,
Yeah.
and not looking at things as, supporting one another and how can we work together and what can we do for each other. So I think that's super important. And I completely agree with you in terms of like my values. Like that's also something I hold very dearly. So yes,
Yeah. Yeah. I like could scream that from the mountaintops.
for sure. So if somebody is like, maybe they have been prioritizing social media or like other forms of marketing, but they know that vendor relationships are really important, or maybe they're newer and they just haven't really gotten out there
Mm.
yet. What would you recommend for somebody who's, maybe just getting started with networking? Like, should they just find their local networking group? Like, what would you recommend for somebody who's getting started with this?
Well, first and foremost, I want to give you a big virtual hug because it can be so intimidating. Like, I get why the immediate go to for couples, like for finding couples and for finding vendors is Instagram because it feels a little easier to reach out, especially if you get rejected versus being like rejected face to face. But the best thing that you can do for your business really truly is get in front of people physically. And that can look like a lot of things. You mentioned, what are the networking groups in your areas? Look for open house events, look for meetups, look for anything in your area that could also remotely be about your industry. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like wedding industry event night or like networking night. That's great. If you see that, please go to it. There's a ton of those opportunities. Here in Sacramento, we have Vendors Night Out. It's launching in the Bay Area. Two of incredible planners in our area have started those businesses, and they're amazing. There's tons of networking events like that. However, don't limit your search when you're trying to find them. If you're brand new and you're looking, yes, look for that. But also look for Entrepreneur Galentine's Night Out. Sip and Paint specifically for women business owners or CEOs of creative businesses, right? Like there's other buzzwords you can use in your search in order to find something where you will absolutely find other wedding vendors and or just other people who are small business owners, maybe not in our industry, but are creatives and understand the need for these types of relationships to be fostered, that absolutely know people who are getting engaged. Right. And it's kind of even a bigger win if you meet a bunch of people that don't really know a lot of people in the wedding industry and you really jive and you really connect and you share the same values and morals and things like that. Because when they have somebody get engaged, you're on their mind and not in just like a pool of a bunch of people. Right. So I think that that's really important. Maybe I'm jumping the gun here. We're going to get to this, but I can't not speak to it. One of the best relationships to make outside of these types of events, these larger events where you have to kind of be like you feel like a small fish in a large pond, right? Other people who you've been told are your competition, they can be the biggest blessing on your business and on your life and on so many aspects that you have just no idea, but we've just been ingrained. Like, I'm a wedding planner, so like other wedding planners are my competition. I can't be friends with them. They're going to steal my business. They're going to steal my ideas and my couples, and we can't have it. You're laughing because outside of venue preferred vendor lists, our number one referral in this type of category that we're discussing are other planners. Because, okay, there are 52 weekends in a year. I can't do all the weddings. There's like, what, billions every year? Like, you can't, we need people to refer just on that basis. It's also a great person to lean on when you have a question or you're struggling or you're wanting to vent about something. I mean, the list goes on and on. So if I'm just getting started and I'm looking at these networking events and all these other things, but I'm seeing these pockets of time, like I don't have anything going on in the month of March to meet other people. This is where coupling the idea of building vendor relationships with Instagram or social media is really beneficial. Get on Instagram, find the people in your area that are your competition, air quotes, and DM them and say, hey, let's get coffee. Let's talk about what we do. Let's be there for each other. Some people may not respond to you, but I guarantee you, if you got that text or you got that DM, how excited would you be? More often than not, pretty freaking thrilled.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I'm glad you brought it up now. That I mean, I was going to ask you about it, but
Yeah, I know. I kind of jumped the gun, but it was
that's
so perfect
okay.
right there.
No, totally. It sounds like in your area you have a really great community, and in my area
Mm,
I have an amazing community, and I hear stories of other parts of
I
the
know.
country where it's like there is not that level of just relationship among planners or among photographers or among florists, what have you. It's like it is that kind of air of competition, and we can't share with each other because, like you said, you're going to steal my ideas or whatever. And that just always makes me so sad. But I really believe that like no matter where you live, there are always going to be people who have the same values and, you know, like same vision as you. And it's just a matter of like finding those people. Like you said, messaging them on Instagram. Like if you see another vendor in your same category and you really align with what they're posting, I mean, there's no reason you can't just reach out to them and just say, hey,
Yeah.
I think we'd really get along great. And I'd love to just, you know, get coffee, whatever. Because as planners, it's such a unique thing that we
Yeah.
do and that we experience. And so having other planners to talk to and share about our experiences and what we have gone through or like any kind of struggles that we're going through is so important. And obviously, we want to have frienders across all categories, but there's just something really special about like a planner to planner
Yeah.
relationship.
And I want to hone in on something that you said because I do think we are fortunate, the two communities that we're in. But I think that that started somewhere, being more community over competition than like shark eat shark.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has to start somewhere. And I know you've put in a lot of effort to create community. I know I've put in a lot of effort to create community and not just credit, all of that, kumbayaness to us, but there's people like that doing that type of work in a community. There's going to be a group that is born that believes this and maybe not born, but like feels comfortable putting themselves out there in that way because they know it'll be reciprocated instead of like door slammed in their face. Like, what are you doing? You're my competition. Right. And so if you're listening to this and you feel that like urge to make that happen in your community, you're tired of it being so competitive in a negative way, change it.
Mm-hmm.
Go do it. Go create community, right? And in the meantime, join other virtual communities that can support you in that journey, right? And tell you like, no, yes, this is what you should be doing. This is a great idea. I mean, that's what we do in Wedding Planner Roadmap is we support each other in those endeavors. And people are doing planner meetups all across the country. Just literally so easy. Hey, I'm a planner, you're a planner. I'm going to host a lunch. Do you want to come? Cool. And it's like everyone just meets at this lunch spot and it's like all of a sudden 11 planners are hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the community.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I would really encourage people to just, if you don't have that in your area, yeah, exactly what you said. Just be the one to make it happen and get it started. And yes, maybe it's a little scary and maybe you don't know exactly what you're doing, but guaranteed that there are people who feel exactly like you that are like wanting and craving that community. And if you can be the one to get that in place, like it's going to impact, not just you, but a lot of other people too. And it's needed. It's needed. So,
yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
Okay. So I'm just trying to think like which direction to go because this is just so good. Do you have any tips for maintaining vendor relationships when like maybe you only see vendors on the wedding days or like maybe you only see them a couple of times a year at a networking event? Like, do you have any ideas of how to just maintain those relationships throughout the year?
Yeah, I mean, this is where the marriage, the beautiful marriage of in-person and social media really becomes your biggest, strength in this nurturing world because you got to nurture. You can't just always need something from someone or, drop off the face of the earth and resurface, once every blue moon and be expectant of massive amounts of referrals and all these beautiful things that come from a great relationship. You have to put in the work. It's like dating, right? And how do you nurture a relationship? Think about like your long distance bestie. Think about your aunt that you catch up with that lives in another, state than you do, that you don't get to go grab lunch with or whatever it is. Even if you are local, we're all busy. We all run small businesses. Even if you live down the street, it could feel like they live in another state, right? So to your point, like, how do you nurture that? Engage on each other's content. That's the best way to be like, I see you, I support you, because that is support. We know as small business owners, the more likes, the more shares, the more comments, the more engagement we get, the more likely we are to get in front of other people. So if you're out there doing that to your frienders, guess what? They're going to do it back. Golden rule, right? Like, treat others the way you want to be treated. Go like their stuff, go share their stuff, go comment on it, send it to a friend, do all the things that you wish people were doing for you or would do more of for you, and see that reciprocated. And that's an excellent way to actively support and nurture a relationship. Eventually you're going to get to the point where texting each other randomly isn't weird, right? Like, that's probably going to feel weird right out the gate. But like, after a couple hangouts or, supporting each other online and a few hilarious DM conversations later, a text may not feel so weird. And you can go ahead and text each other when you think of each other and, a funny thing happens at a wedding, right? Like, we all have wedding horror stories. And you probably have the people that immediately pop into your head that's like, oh my God, they're going to think this is insane. Text them. Build that. That's how that works.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's like dating. It's like any other relationship. I mean, it takes effort.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of thing that we can just like start building and then completely forget about it. And the word nurture, like you mentioned, it takes time. I tell everyone like about, just networking in general, like it's a long game. Like, it's not the overnight fix. It's not a quick thing. It's a long game, but it's so worth it. Like, it is worth the time and the commitment because the value that you get from it. I mean, having these close relationships, having people that I can refer and recommend, having people that I can share with, in my own struggles, like, there's nothing that compares with that. So it's very worth it.
And one of the things you just said that reminded me of a huge piece of this is the value, right? You said the value in these relationships. Yes, there's the value in the referrals, but to your point, there's the value in connection and really having someone that is in your corner, alongside building a friendship and just having fun with it. But there's one thing that we're not talking about that I think is one of the most valuable pieces. Again, I'm going to go back to, because everything that what you just said and what we've been sharing is crosses over from whether they're just a wedding industry pro or they're a direct, like, they do the same thing service that you do. So planner to planner, photographer to photographer, florist to florist. But there's a specific one with that element where they do what you do that is of such value. And that is, we are not large corporations with Rolodex. Oh, does that age me? Even though I don't even know that I've ever used Rolodex. Rolodex. We're gonna go with it. Of names to call in when someone's sick, or if somebody has an emergency, like, okay, we'll just go to, you're on call today, or hey, can you switch your shift? Like, we don't have that. Most of us. There's a percentage that has, really large teams where that's not a problem, but that's a very small percentage. Most of us have our immediate team. That's 1 to 2 to 3 people. And then they have like the secondary team, which are like maybe a handful, I'm going to use planner language, handful of assists that also assist other planners, right? And then we have who? Friends, family, and that gets scary. What do you do if you, God forbid, get in a major car accident 2 days before a wedding? You now have no car, you've broken a leg, you're on heavy painkillers. Like, literally, what do you do if nobody on your immediate team is ready to lead whatever service it is that you're providing that day? You only have people in your team that can support somebody who is leading. You don't have anybody that can take it over. What do? Guess what? You rely on the relationships that you have created and fostered and nurtured with other people who do what you do and own their own business. You call on them and they say, I got you. We'll figure out pay later. Or, hey, can you take this over? Here's everything for this wedding. I can pay you X. Great. Do you know how many times we've done that for, like, we've needed it? And we've done that for other people, other planners. Or if we can't help, we get the call from somebody else, somebody has an emergency, we put it out to our community. Hey, this person needs somebody, anybody available. That only happens if you put in the effort to make these connections. So that is a huge one I want to make sure we talk about because that is massive value.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. And you're right. Like, you're like, we haven't even mentioned this yet.
We haven't even hit on this.
Yes, no, that's huge. Yeah, I have like a Instagram planner chat going, and I can't tell you the number of times that a planner has,
Yeah.
especially like during COVID, somebody came down with COVID and it's like, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
So the amount of times that I saw people like just jumping in to help, yeah, it's incredible. So really, really important to have that because the last thing any of us would ever want is to be in a situation where we weren't able to have coverage for a couple's event and not being able to take care of them.
Yep. Have that emergency list ready.
Mm-hmm.
Have other people that are able to, fully take it on, not just support.
Exactly. Okay. I was just curious, do you have any stories that you could share about like a vendor relationship that, I don't know. Do you have any stories to share?
I have so many stories to share. I have so many stories to share. Which way are we going? Are we going dramatic? Are we going sweet? Are we going funny? Or what are we doing? Okay, let me think about this because I feel like there's a handful that are just so outrageous that they're really not helpful. More just entertaining. Okay, so I'm going to speak to one. It's very much in tune with what we're discussing right now about what do you do in the instance where you thought you could execute a wedding and you can't. So I'm going to speak to the women out there because sometimes either you're planning maternity leave or maternity leave surprises you and you have to plan one when you weren't thinking of planning one. And what do you do? This happened to me. I was very fortunate that I was already, as a person, already with the man that I wanted to have kids with. I was with the man that I wanted to be married to, but that wasn't going to be happening for like 5 more years. And we, surprise, got pregnant. And I found out almost just over 2 months into the pregnancy with my son Shane. And so at that point, I needed backup starting in like 6 months. And I had a lead planner quit because she was moving and all the things. And then my other lead planner, who's my right hand, Kate, she was pregnant with her baby due a month apart from mine.
Oh, wow.
So I had nobody. And so I thought, after crying a lot and stressing a lot, because I had like 6 weddings around the time frame of my due date that I was like, I don't know what I don't know what to do. So I ended up calling, her name's Aubrey. She and her business partner, Sarah, they were 2 different planners that have merged their companies. They're curated by Grace and White. And she is my knight in shining armor, and she knows this. I called her because at the time, Sarah and I, when they were not a merged company, Sarah and I had launched our business within a couple months of each other. So we kind of were going through the baby phases together of business. And then Aubrey was like 3 years ahead of us. And so we just were constantly asking her questions and she's, giving advice and I've done this before or whatever. And I called her and I wasn't planning to cry, but I burst into tears, told her what was happening. And she just said, Becca, breathe. And I was like, oh my gosh. She goes, just give me dates. I will get you lead planners. And I just, again, burst into more tears after she had calmed me down. Because I actually don't know what I would have done without her. I don't know what I would have done. I probably refunded money I didn't have anymore and canceled a lot of contracts and really devastated a lot of people within 6 months of their wedding. And I didn't have to do any of that. And so we had a whole plan. I won't go into all of that, but I have to tell the funniest part of the story because my due date was May 4th. And my first wedding that I had planned backup for was April 14th. If my family is listening to this, they know that date. So I made a joke at that rehearsal the night before. And luckily, this was the first wedding that I had whole back, like, hey, if I go into labor, here's what we do kind of plan was starting on that wedding through to the next 6 or 7 to just cover me. At the rehearsal on the 13th, I go, all right, everybody, great rehearsal. I'll see y'all tomorrow unless I go into labor. Guess what I did 4 hours later? Totally went into labor.
Oh my gosh.
So I send the text to the photographer, who is a really good friend and also the venue owner, the backup lead of Aubrey's, and my team, just as, the assists that were going to be there that day, and say, I'm in labor. I'm going to the hospital. Best of luck. Please hug the couple for me. And they all just were like, got it. And then the next morning after I had my son, I sent a selfie to the planner who had taken over. And she sent me a selfie back with the couple. And they were just like, yay, we get to share our wedding day with your son. And it was so great. But had I not had vendor relationships and vendor connections, none of that would have ever happened. At least that smoothly and that beautifully, where we're sending selfies and it's all good and happy.
Yeah. Wow.
But I think that's my favorite story about vendor relationships because, man.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And people think like, oh, that would never happen to me, or like, I don't know, like any number of situations you think wouldn't happen to you until it's happening to you. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful story. And I'm sure will be very inspiring for others. And hopefully will just encourage people to get out there and make those connections and build those relationships.
I mean, bottom line, you don't know what's coming and it's all a surprise. So make it more fun by having friends and also make it less stressful by knowing you have people to lean on.
Great advice. So I want to chat a little bit about your coaching and some of your educational stuff. But before that, do you have any like final tips or words of encouragement or anything else that you would just add on this topic of vendor relationships?
Don't be afraid to get rejected because sometimes the rejection isn't what you think it is. Sometimes the rejection is they're just slammed and they just don't have time. So if you make the ask, let's get coffee, and you just never hear back or they're too busy, it's not you. Try again. Just keep trying. Eventually you will be the person that's like too busy and you'll realize it has nothing to do with not wanting to hang out with them. And now here's the thing is if that person just really doesn't want to hang out with you, you don't want that to be your vendor connection anyways. So move on. But don't be afraid to reach out. Put yourself out there. I know it feels really vulnerable. I know it feels really scary, but I promise you when I say it is one of not only the most fulfilling on like human to human level, let's talk about ROI, return on investment. The most direct ROI you can think of because you're putting in this effort for these fun vendor relationships that literally come back in form of revenue for your business by solid leads from great couples. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be the reason you don't get that type of lead because you just are nervous.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, not to get discouraged if if you don't hear back. We've all been there. And it can be scary at first because you don't know how people are going to respond and that kind of thing, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it. And
100%.
Okay. Well, can you just share with us a little bit about your coaching for wedding planners? And I know you do like a retreat too. So I would love to just have you share a little bit about all those fun things.
We are all over the place. So I will happily condense it. So as you guys know, we've been talking a lot about the wedding planning side of the business. I'm also a business coach specifically for wedding planners. I have my signature 90-day group coaching program called Wedding Planner Roadmap. It's 90 days group coaching program specifically designed to give you the foundation that you need. Whether you're just about to launch, we've had people launch in the program, or you've launched 3 to 5 years ago and you did so without a strategy and without a real understanding of how this business thing works. That's what Wedding Planner Roadmap gives you alongside of community. It's not just an online course. I'm actively coaching you through it. And we actually just did a huge revamp of it. It's a lot more affordable now. I just wanted to be able to impact more planners. So definitely check that out. And then the other thing that we have on the coaching side, I have a handful of online courses. That piece is going to be building up for people who really are looking for something even less involved than that. And then the fun stuff, because we know, what have we been talking about this whole time? In person is so important because all that's virtual. So what's in person? That's the retreat we have. So Kate, she is my right-hand gal in my company. I literally couldn't do anything without her. She's our director of events, but she is also the co-creator and inspiration behind Ignite Co-Treat. We call it Co-Treat because it is a conference-style retreat, and it is specifically for wedding planners. And we are going to the most beautiful private resort oasis in Mexico in February 2026. We still have some tickets available. And just be prepared to be pampered in more ways than one. So we're going to sit poolside and sip Mai Tais and do all the fun things. There's an underground lagoon, literally underground lagoon. It's amazing. I'm so excited. And a water slide. Anyways, okay, I'm derailing. There's that stuff. But then you're also there for 5 days with other wedding planners who are not only needing a break, but also looking for ways to really foster the growth of their business. Our theme is next level. So whatever that next level is for you, the retreat, the co-treat will be designed around getting you there. So there's something for everybody. You can be brand new. You can be a 10-year vet. This is specifically designed for tactical business strategy and mindset strategy. That's where Kate comes in to get you to that next level. I'm so freaking excited. The last one we did was absolute magic. It was absolute magic. So that's Ignite, but I'm very passionate about it because I believe we all need to be in person.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that sounds incredible. I'm going to have to, you said it's February of 2026. I know. I'm like, I might need to look into this a little bit. That sounds
We'll get you a link offline. Yeah, it's February 2026. We chose February for, it's the most universally slow month, I think, across the board for planners. So we wanted to keep that in mind.
Yeah. It's genius. And my birthday month is February. So, I mean.
Oh my gosh. You're just giving yourself less and less reason not to go. We'll celebrate you.
I love that. And I love the name too. I used to do it's very small scale, but I did workshops for wedding pros and it was called Ignite and Gather. And I've just always loved the word ignite. It's such a great word.
We have so many things about our journeys in business that overlap. It's kind of wild. Our names,
crazy.
business names, so cool. I'm into
it. Absolutely. It's been so fun talking to you. I really love just getting to know you more and hearing about your story. And I think people are going to just really appreciate all of the wisdom that you shared with us today. So obviously everyone's going to want to come and find out about your retreat and your coaching. So where can they find you online?
Yeah. So the easiest place is Instagram at Becca Christine with a K Tuttle, Tuttle. I'm sure that'll be in the show notes, but that's the best Instagram for my coaching side. For Ignite specifically, we have at Ignite Co-Treat. Those are definitely the two places you want to go just to get all the information. I'm always sharing links to the different pages that go in more depth to all of these programs and happenings. But that's definitely the hub. So definitely do that. Definitely sign up for the email lists because that's also where first access goes for anything that we launch. But eventually, and you're going to be a guest on it, eventually I'll be launching a podcast as well. I'm going to start recording for that actually here in the next couple of months. And so that'll be another really great place to go to get more, free education and inside scoop on all this stuff.
Yay. Yeah. I'm so excited for your podcast. It's going to be amazing.
I can't wait to have
you. Absolutely. I know. I really feel like we could have talked for so long about so many different things. So
I think we have at least 3 or 4 more episodes between the two of our podcasts coming to you soon from Becca and Becky.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much again for sharing your time. I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
This has been a blast and an absolute honor to be on your podcast. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Event Crushed podcast. I hope you found value in this episode, and if you did, please consider sharing it with a wedding industry friend. We also hope you'll consider leaving a rating or review for the show to help other listeners find it. This podcast is edited and produced by Ace Sound Design. If you're looking to elevate your audio experience, their info can be found in the show description. As always, thank you for listening, and please connect with us on Instagram if you haven't already. Now, get out there and crush it.